Do you see a little record sign?
I do.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're recording, and I am here with my friend who I haven't spoken to in about 2 years, right? We did an interview much like this, similar to this, about 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. The one and only Sandra Joseph, who has the very prestigious title, talking about titles, right? And other people's sort of status recognition, because that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today. But Sandra holds the title of being the longest leading lady in the longest running Broadway show, Phantom of the Opera, right?
Yes.
And we recently connected, Sandra and I, because she recently wrote a book that's been published. That's a big part of what we're going to talk about today, what that book talks about and how that relates to my mission and purpose, which is all about seizing your passion and realizing all your dreams. I was going to say what you're doing today because you are no longer on Broadway, but I'm going to let you introduce yourself. I know the title that you're often introduced with, but I'm going to let you say hi, introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you're doing today and why you wrote this book, and then we'll start diving deep into some of the topics we talked about.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sandra Joseph, and hi, Rachel, my soul sister. I'm so happy to be talking to you, and you and I share so much of the same mission and passion and purpose and where we are in our lives right now. And you have your background that brought you to what you're doing now, and so do I. My background, as you mentioned, was on Broadway. I started in Phantom for about 10 years. And now I'm doing keynote speaking and inspirational, motivational messaging around how to not only play the leading role in your own life, but how to create more meaning. The book that I wrote that came out just in January of this year, 2018, is called Unmasking What Matters.
I have it here. Let me just...
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Oh, I should be holding it up. Right. Thanks.
I'll show it later again. But
I have all the Post-its in there. I do that with all my books too. Yeah. And so as we were discussing before we got on the recording here, the book took me a very long time to write, about 14 years from the moment I knew I wanted to write a book until I had a finished product, because I really struggled with how to say what I really wanted to say. And maybe that's something that you're going through too. It can be a real challenge learning to trust our own voice. That was my struggle on the road to Broadway, as well as my struggle with what I'm doing now. It's been very interesting to watch the parallels in the two paths, because it is very similar. I shared in our previous interview about my journey to Broadway, where I didn't nail it the first try. For Phantom, I had 3 auditions, and it was very much a Goldilocks kind of story. The first one, I was too small. I was intimidated and fearful. Second time, I tried too hard. I was too big, pushing. And the third time, I sort of let go of my expectation of ever getting it, because I thought I'd already blown it twice. It's never going to happen. I might as well go in there and try to really be present and enjoy the opportunity to sing on a Broadway stage for potentially the last time. And the third time, I was more authentic. I was in my own voice. I was there. I was present. Similarly, with the journey to this book and to the journey to what I'm doing now with my life, with keynote speaking, trying to find my own voice, my own way of showing up that felt authentic to me was difficult. I looked around at what everyone else was doing with speaking. Well, I guess I have to have my PowerPoint and my three takeaways or whatever. I looked at books that were, okay, well, this is what the structure of this book needs to be. And ultimately, it took me many false starts, like barreling down one road, hitting a brick wall, coming back to ground zero, starting again. But ultimately, I threw away what I thought it should be. And I got really quiet and asked myself, what is it that matters most to me to say? And that's what I started with. And it unfolded from there. And I let go of what do publishers want? What does the market care about? I said, no, what do I want to say? And it's funny, I hear other creative people talk about this same thing. Like, I don't know if you watched Project Runway. That was one of the shows I'd been very into.
In the past.
And the guy who won this year, I remember him saying when he got to his final designs, he did not think he was going to win. So he threw away expectations of everything and made the collection he most wanted to make. And that's what ended up making him successful. Mm-hmm. So we sort of unshackle ourselves and give ourselves the freedom to say what's important to us, whatever that looks like for you. That's when we really connect to ourselves, to our higher purpose, to the audience, to each other.
Exactly. I was going to say, and that actually, and I imagine he actually is the one who won because he did that.
Yeah.
And when you were there and truly present and let go of all the fears and expectations and what you think you should do according to other people in your third audition, that's when you landed the role, right?
Yeah.
Connected, and that's why this book is the voice that came out from you, where you scrapped and fell and threw away all the other versions, because you said, you know what? So I'm curious. You said you sat with yourself, you got quiet, and you said, what do I want to say that's the most important, that matters the most to me? What is it that I want to share, right? And that's any piece of art that we create. It's what do we want to share with the world? What is our true values, belief systems, lessons learned, that is creating something, because you're by the very act that you're expressing it in whatever format, and you're sharing it with other people, and that connects them, and that connects the human, element in all of us. And I told you that this book resonated with me, not only on a personal level because of my acting background. So I very much, the context of the way the story unfolds, I could so relate to on so many levels, and it brought me back, and it was very nostalgic for me as well. But it resonated with me on such a universal human condition level, which is why I know it's going to resonate with anyone who reads it. And that ties into my question, which is, you said you sat down with yourself, you got quiet, and you asked yourself, what is it that you really want to say that really matters to you? So, and I'm basically asking you to tell me in one or two sentences what this whole book is about, but what is the answer that came to you? What was that answer? What is it that you really realized, this is what I want to share with the world?
Yeah.
What is that?
It did not come in a download moment. It did not happen overnight. It was, although the structure for the book did happen overnight. I woke up one morning and said, this is how I'm doing it, period, end of story. I had to ultimately, as far as structure, pick a horse and ride it, as they say, because there are so many ways you can go. And I'm one of those people that suffers from too many ideas, and I get lost in it, and then I never get to the finish line. So, but the what do I want to say piece, here's what was challenging. I so relate to people, they say we teach what we most need to learn. What I have needed most to learn in my life and continue to struggle with at times is ultimately about self-worth and recognizing that we all have the right to express fully the biggest and best version of ourselves. It was not safe for me in my life as a young person to be seen, to be big, to be fully expressed. So like so many of us, I learned to play small and be safe and try to not be seen and heard. And so I wanted so badly to give other people permission to live their biggest, highest, grandest vision for themselves, to not play small, to begin to trust themselves, to be able to take the risks that can get you to where you really want to be. Because I believe so wholeheartedly that, you know, if I can do that, if this scared, shy, insecure girl from Detroit can move through that fear and put herself out there and end up being successful beyond anything I could have imagined in a very visible way, then anybody can find it in themselves to blossom. But I wanted people to do it without struggling the way that I did. And because here's what I also know to be true. You can get to the top of the mountain and suddenly you recognize, oh, I'm still the scared, insecure person on the inside, even though I have all the outer appearances of having arrived. So ultimately, in one sentence, what the book is about is the journey upward and the journey inward. It's about the fact that the journey upward is nothing without the journey inward. Because had I been able to recognize my own fundamental self-worth from the start, then the climb would have been easier in many ways, because I wouldn't have been trying to get somewhere because I'm trying to prove myself or gain self-worth by external means. But also, once I arrived, when I recognized, wherever you go, there you are. And now it just morphs into imposter syndrome and the feeling that I don't really deserve to be here. Any day they're going to find out I'm a fraud and I don't belong, I don't deserve. All that nonsense starts to happen. Yeah. So really it's about healing the voices and the damage, the old wounds that lie to all of us, that try to make us believe we don't deserve or we're not worthy in some way. All that noise. So the book is about both. It's about empowering ourselves to go for our dreams and goals and recognizing that whatever happens on the outside, self-worth is an inside job. So I give tools and practices to come home to ourselves. And from that place, if we begin with that foundation of believing in ourselves and knowing our own worth and value, then we become free to do what I said about the book and about the Broadway auditions, like letting go of the outcome and simply following our own aliveness, our sense of passion and joy, which is so much of what CIOPA is about.
100%. You said so much there that I want to dive a little bit deeper into. But, one of the things that's been somewhat of a struggle for me to convey in my mission and messaging that I wish to express to the world and staying true to my authentic self, right? And discovering that is that the message of Seize Your Passion has that duality within it as well. That yes, it is 100% about empowering people and believing in your dreams and going after your dreams. And that entails achievement and success and goals. And there's no shame in wanting all those beautiful things. However, it's also at the same time, and they're not mutually exclusive. They seem sometimes like they're conflicting forces, but they're actually complementary, and you can't have one without the other. And it's also very much about, our last interview, we talked about this, about what Seize Your Passion means to you, I asked you. And yes, we talked about the dreams and achieving and believing, but you also talked about, doing stuff that you love with no end goal in mind. You know, what do you do for play? And tapping into what brings you alive that's not necessarily tied to those other end goals. And it's not that you have to pick one or the other. It's both. And in fact, what I loved so much about this book is that it really touches on how to reconcile those two. You know, again, this is something that I myself struggle with all the time in my own personal life and with what I'm doing with my work with CIOPA, is how do you reconcile those two, right? It's not about giving up the climb upward or not going after your dreams or not wanting to be a high achiever and perform at your best. That's a beautiful, and I would argue it's vital in order to actually take the journey inside and know your self-worth.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess what I want to ask you, and it's, you know, I don't know, maybe you don't know either yet, and maybe we all have to figure it out for ourselves, but it's kind of like The Alchemist, you know, which happens to be my favorite book, where he has to go on that hero's journey. He has to go on that quest in order to come back to what was always inside of him and what he always had. But you can't have one without the other. So the question is, you know, how do you climb that mountain? How do you go after your dreams? How do you be your best and strive to achieve everything you want to achieve and not get caught up in, I guess, what you were just talking about? First of all, you know, that feeling of proving something. You know, you talked about it in the context for you personally, where you always felt from your childhood that you had to make yourself small, and so that was where your lessons to be learned about self-worth, that you are enough, and you know, but I know a lot of people can relate to that, but I come at it from a different perspective, where I only realized recently how much of a driver for me my whole life, without even being aware of it, proving myself was. And it didn't come from that place. I don't think that I ever felt that I had to be small. In fact, if anything, I overcompensated and was always big. It's the same fear, and it's just we all approach it differently. You know, so I didn't make myself small. If anything, I made myself bigger than life and larger than life to overcompensate for my own lack of self-worth, because I was always looking for how do I prove my significance? How do I prove that I am enough? And it was always tied to those achievements. Yeah. So again, how do you reconcile the two without losing, or without getting to the point where, okay, I've achieved this success and I'm still there, right? What you said, wherever I go, there's me. How do you simultaneously take the journey upward as well as inward, rather than get to the top and then only to discover, oh my God, I was on the wrong journey and I did it. I have to now go inward. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yes. I love the question, and I love everything that you just shared and brought to light. I think a huge key to unlock this for all of us is in how we hold it, how we look at it, how we view it, and recognizing that it is a paradox. It is not, as you said, one or the other. They're not mutually exclusive. It's a paradox. We're all on this same road. We're all on this same journey. Yeah. And having conversations like this is part of what helps us hold it differently, to step outside of our own narrow view of things and get a larger perspective to see what other people are going through. That alone is healing. You're sharing what you just shared is speaking to somebody who's on that, goes, oh yeah, that's what I do too. I try to push and prove, and ultimately, what's it really about? So it is a paradox. It does not mean that, I think there's a fear that if we really let go and allowed that space of surrender, that we would just sit back and watch TV all day and eat bonbons and not do anything.
And that's not what we're saying at
That's
all.
not at all what we're saying, because I don't find that to be what actually happens. To me, this is ultimately a question of self-love.
Mm-hmm.
It's a question of, do you love yourself wholeheartedly, and recognizing you're not perfect and letting that be okay, and recognizing that your life is not given to you as a self-improvement project or an achievement test. That is not why you were put on this planet. So once you have that profound sense of belonging on the earth, like belonging in your life, recognizing you have as much right to take up space as anyone who has ever been born, that's a huge shift for a lot of people. And that took me a really long time to find in myself. But once you've found that profound peace, then you're unshackled, you're free to go for it in an even bigger way, because you recognize, if I fail, if I make a fool of myself, if it all comes crashing down, I'm still going to be okay, because there are still people who love me. I still love myself and appreciate my efforts, and I will go to my grave knowing I tried my best. What else are we here for? And there's more fun along the way. There's more play. There's more a sense of going for it. Like, I still do things all the time that scare me because they're unfamiliar. They're new. I'm invited to speak in places where I go, they really are going to let me in the door with these billionaires who can, I'm movers and shakers that are changing the world in these ways that are mind-blowing to me, that understand things about technology that I will never on this earth understand, So there are times when I still feel a sense of, well, I'm walking into the fire here. I don't know what this is going to be like. I don't know how I'll be accepted or rejected. But there's less a sense of the consequences will be so dire if I fail. I really can come from more of a place of, well, I'm going to do my best. It's not going to be perfect, and I'm going to try my hardest and let the chips fall where they may. And it's going to be okay.
And I think, you tell me, but you said something earlier that I think is the key of how to do that. How to truly seize your passion, do what you love, follow your heart, go after your dreams, and not have it so devastatingly life or death, am I going to be approved? Are they going to accept me, or am I going to get rejected, or am I going to fall flat on my face, right? Yeah. It's as simple as, I'm not saying it's the only thing, but I think a key part of it, you said it earlier, is learning to let go of the outcome.
Yes, huge.
Right?
Huge. And inherent in that is knowing who you are. Knowing that, and it comes down again to self-love. Knowing this is what we can stand on, like to be so rooted in knowing our own fundamental goodness. I know my own heart. That I can say for sure. I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm going to make mistakes daily. But at the end of the day, I also recognize the fundamental goodness that is here in the life that is here. And everyone can say that. Everyone can find. And it's a practice. I think this takes practice to come home to who we really are. And for me, one of the biggest keys to it is, and this every psychologist will tell you, and psychiatrists, that we learn about ourselves through relationship, through other people. So if there is one person on this planet who loves you wholeheartedly, who will have your back and pick you up when you fall, when you fail, and they will love you even though you've failed or humiliated yourself, and they will hug you and say, oh, Rachel, you're so beautiful and so good, and I love you, and I see you, I get you. Then you can hold that and begin to embody that for yourself. There's profound healing in that, in a profound sense of safety that gives you permission to play big in the world, because you know that at the end of the day, you're loved by others and hopefully ultimately by yourself. This is the journey for all of us, is to have our own back, to be our own best friend.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I swear I want to give you a standing ovation right now. I swear to God. I mean, oh my God. You speak to my heart directly, really. So you said, knowing our own goodness, it's also, it's saying the same thing. It's just, for me, I don't know, framing it in the words of knowing our own value.
Yes.
And the other huge piece of it, which you came around to on your own, is it's, not looking for that other person. Yes, that's your first example of the kind of love, unconditional love, fully accepting love with all the imperfections and all the mess ups and everything. But it's learning how to give that to yourself and how to have your own back in that way, and I think you even touch on this in the book, and I've said it before. I know that, we tell our closest friends, we tell our children, be true to yourself, follow your heart. It doesn't matter if you fail. It's just give it the best you have. Try, seize your passion, follow your dreams. And yet we don't tell ourselves that. We're so hard on ourselves. And the minute we fall down, we're so ruled by that fear of rejection and failure and not having the approval of others, and that we'll be seen for who we really are, which we don't see the beauty of that. We see the fallacies of that. It's so huge, so huge. But again, how do you get there while you're climbing up, rather than getting to the top and then realizing, oh, it wasn't about that, it was about this? How do you do both at the same time?
Well, I have to say that what you just described, that is the lesson that I learned from Phantom, from being in that show for all those years. And I talk about it in the book, that it's 10 life lessons from 10 years on Broadway. The biggest one, the first one in the book, is to see behind the mask. Because my favorite moment to play at the end of the show, and this is a spoiler alert for the few people who have not seen the show, she holds his face, his unmasked face, in her hands. And it was my job every night to see this flawed person on the outside and to feel nothing but pure, unconditional love for him. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine all the love that's ever existed pouring through my eyes and into his, so that he could feel his own goodness, his own value, his own beauty. Mm-hmm. And yet, I would, even though I played that scene on stage every night, I would go home and beat up on myself for the flaws in my performance, the flaws in my personal life. It was so clear to me, I can do it for him on stage. I can play this and I feel it. And it's so sacred and right and true and beautiful. It is everything I believe that I would give to another human. Yeah. I cannot give that same gift to myself. And if I can't do that, all the success is worthless. It doesn't mean anything. So how do we begin to see who we are behind the mask, to see that the pair of eyes in the mirror with that same kind of love and compassion and acceptance that we would give to anybody else? That is a practice. And to me, it is the practice of a lifetime. It is, Joseph Campbell says, the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are.
Yeah.
The privilege of a lifetime is to give ourselves that same kind of permission to love, accept, and appreciate the value of the life that is here. If you're judging that person that is in here, the being that's here, then you're doing a disservice to the planet. You're slapping it's like slapping God in the face. That which gave you life, you're saying when there's criticism and hatred, and I was guilty of it for so many years, real self-loathing.
Yeah.
That is a slap in the face to that which gave you life, to say that there's no value, or to diminish the value of the life that is here. So to me, how we get there, if you can't find it for yourself now, begin finding it in other people, whether it's your daughter, the person you love most in the world, your best friend, your spouse, who you would have their back in a second. If the world is harsh to them, you would wrap your arms around them and try so hard to get them to feel and see and know their own beauty. Begin to withdraw that projection, to bring that into yourself as well, in a very deep way. That's where the healing begins, and that's where we begin to be able to let go of our attachment to the outcomes, because you know that you will not be unkind to yourself in that way. In the same way you would not be unkind to someone else. Begin to talk to yourself in your own mind the way you would talk to that loved one, with the same kind of compassion. Begin to bring that back around to yourself. Come home to you and offer that same compassion to yourself. That's how we have to start treating ourselves.
And it's a practice, like you said, and it's a lifelong practice. It's not, nothing real or meaningful or true is a quick fix or a quick trick. And it's simple, but it's easier said than done. So I think that's an important piece of it. I want to read a few quotes from the book and you, that really, I think, will highlight everything we just talked about. But, you said something about that self-loathing and really learning how to truly love ourselves and having true self-worth. Now, for some people, it's very obvious that they have that, and they're aware that they don't love themselves very much, and it's a lifelong struggle with that. For others, and I'm in this category, I didn't realize for most of my life that I too had that. Because maybe it's another mask that I wore, even for myself. Do you know what I mean? Yep. I never thought of myself as someone who didn't love themselves, as someone who didn't have a lot of self-esteem and self-confidence. Quite the opposite, And so when I had this sort of, and I'm still in the process, it's a lifelong process, it's a journey, but I fairly recently really had this epiphany of, holy shit, my entire life I've been proving something because I didn't have that inherent self-worth, because I didn't believe that I was enough as I am. I had to achieve and accomplish and be the best, and all those things was to compensate for the feeling of ultimately not self-love, not self-worth, but I wasn't aware of it, again, because I wore that mask. And so I think for a lot of people, they might listen to this and say, well, I don't have a problem with that. I love myself. I'm good. I'm confident. I believe in my dreams. And again, that one doesn't negate the other. It's ask yourself, I guess what I'm saying is maybe it's a matter of asking yourself, why is the outcome so important to you? Or what is it that you want the outcome to be? Because if it's about proving your worth or proving your significance to anyone else, anyone, then maybe you should question whether you're loving yourself the way you deserve to love yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's profound.
Yeah.
I do think for many of us, there's there are so many ways that we can hide from the truth of that.
Yeah.
And to look at our own behaviors too. There are all the ways that we run from our feelings.
Yeah.
And what's underneath it really is the feeling of the lack of the ability to love ourselves. So addictive behaviors, being on our devices constantly, anything we're doing to push away feeling, to keep a mask up around even busyness, chronic busyness.
Or success and achievement, right? That's, I mean, a very common one, you know, where it becomes about success for success and other people's definition of what that success is. But really you're running from your own feelings of inadequacy or whatever it is because you don't have that true self-love, right?
Well, I have to share the story, which you know because you read the book, of when I got that loud and clear was at the end of my phantom journey. I felt like, okay, what's the next, where do you go from here? You know, what's the next thing for me to do beyond this pinnacle of what I, you know, beyond anything I could have dreamed of. So the outside world, to look at that, might say to continue to be successful, I had to start starring in films now and television shows, or to win an Oscar, you know, I have to do more and more and bigger and better and higher. And I had a very scary diagnosis of a brain tumor around that time, which thankfully turned out to be nothing. But there was a long waiting period there where I wasn't sure what was going to happen and what this thing was. And in that interim, I was so clear about limited time and my own impermanence. And man, when it's all on the line like that, and you get those moments of absolute clarity about the fact that, oh, the curtain's going to come down for me at some point. I don't know when. It might be today.
Yeah.
How am I spending my time and what really matters to me? That's why the book is called Unmasking What Matters. I got very clear about what mattered, and I knew I didn't want any of that stuff. I didn't want to be so busy anymore. I wanted to spend more time with the people I love. I wanted more white space in my calendar, more time for being outside in nature, more time for being. And if that looked to other people on the outside like I had fallen as far as success goes, then that's fine. They can think what they want. And it does look like that to some people. I still get asked all the time, do you think you'll ever go back to Broadway? Don't you miss it? All those things. And I understand where they're coming from, but oh, I don't feel any of that. I am so clear about what matters to me. So I do think it's important for all of us to really look at, you know, if you're on your deathbed, try to really fast forward in your mind. It's a good acting exercise. Fast forward in your mind to the end of your life, looking back, what really mattered? What did you miss out on? What is it that you really wanted to do and how you wanted to spend your time that you didn't give yourself permission to do?
Right.
I think that those are huge questions.
Huge, and so important. You know, I just want to clarify one point that I think you'll agree with me on. You were at a stage in your life where you had reached the pinnacle. And at that point, you decided and you had clarity about what mattered to you from that point forward. That's not to disregard that the pinnacle that you reached and you're realizing your dreams beyond your wildest dreams wasn't what really mattered to you then. you know, it's not to disregard that. And it's not to say that you shouldn't. My point is, what really matters evolves and changes as you grow through life and through the process. And it's not to say that you regret having done what you've done and accomplished what you've accomplished and reaching the success you achieved. You were just at another stage, at the next stage. Correct?
Yes. And absolutely. And it's all related to what we've been talking about, because here's the miracle. Here's what happens when you come back home to who you are and you get clear about what matters. Just like in those auditions for Phantom, when I was filing that third audition, when I was in that place of presence and authenticity, just like with my book, finally coming to let go of what the outside world said about it and getting to trust my own voice. Yeah. In the same way, along this same journey, I have found my true work, my true passion, my true voice. Again, I could not have imagined that I would be giving keynote speeches at Fortune 500 companies and singing as part of an inspirational talk. Like, that didn't exist in my mind. I could not have made that up or planned for it. Mm-hmm. But it found me. Again, it's coming back to that alignment, coming back to that place of authentic presence and flow and self-worth and self-love, that then it's like the universe hears that and meets you halfway and helps you find what you're really here to be and do and become. That's the miracle of it.
But not that theater and Broadway wasn't your passion then, and doing that was also part of who you are here to become. You just became it already, and it was the next
iteration, which is ever evolving. Exactly. But it's the difference, I think, between a rose that is a bud that's becoming fully in full bloom, that we're always blossoming, and it's in full bloom at every stage. When it's still a bud, it's not incomplete. That's just where it is right now, fully expressed. And as we grow and evolve, we just keep opening. But the difference is, for many years of my life, I was the rose looking over and going, but the tulips are better and prettier, and I should really be a tulip. I feel like that's really how I'm supposed to show up in the world, you know? And so for all of us, whenever we, I think, come home to recognizing that we're whole right now at every stage, we're whole. Our only job is to keep opening, and keep coming back to know that you are exactly who you're supposed to be on this planet and where you are right now. I love that quote from Hafiz. The place where you are right now, God circled on a map for you. You are exactly where you're supposed to be, right here, right now. And so to own that, to be peaceful in that, and to just keep opening. That's all we have to do. I know it sounds overly simplistic, but where we trip ourselves up is by going, well, you know, I really should be where that person is, or I'm not there yet, so I have to run faster and climb higher. When you can breathe, and we're never required to do more than we can do peacefully. Coming back to that centered place, that peaceful place, that authentic present place, that's where our best work evolves from, and where the best opportunities find us.
Right.
That's what I have found to be true in my own experience.
Love that. That's really, really beautiful. All right. I'm mindful of the time, so I want to just read a few quotes from you and from the book itself. The Phantom of the Opera knows one thing for sure. The only way to have a truly fulfilling life and achieve success that satisfies is to recognize that the journey up is no substitute for the journey in. And of course, we started on that topic where they're not mutually exclusive. They go hand in hand. They are paradoxical, but they make the complete whole. And one is not a substitute for the other. And you have to practice journeying both ways, upward and inward at the same time. I love that. And here, this is just to tie a nice bow around that. This is your quote. We are addicted to doing, climbing, achieving, failing to realize that the journey upward won't lead us to what we're truly seeking. What matters most comes from the journey inward. I want all of us to go after our dreams, but we must start with a foundation of inherent self-worth, or the success we achieve won't satisfy. We must avoid the trap of seeking outside ourselves to know that we matter. I love that. I think that kind of speaks to everything we just spoke about and to what really this book is about. For me, that's what, it just resonates in such a big way. Let's see, now I'm gonna see what else. See if there's anything we missed or that I want to emphasize. So this touches on your answer to how do we do that? How do we reconcile the two? And you said the answer, it's a lifelong practice. So this touches on that, again, from the book. This does not mean that we should always be looking for the next best thing. In contrast, the new paradigm of success, if we are wise, will not be about bigger, better, more, but about living wholeheartedly as you. No longer a life of endless striving, but a life of endless practice at being completely here, completely you, with nothing separating you from your direct experience of being alive. I love that as well.
Amen.
Amen. Amen, sister.
It is so much of what we've been talking about.
Yes. Yes.
Blossoming into more and more of who you are.
And here again, so you share towards the end of the book, you share about where you are today, and that your sort of new dream came to you where you saw yourself on stage.
I did, yeah.
To an audience of people, but you weren't in a costume. You weren't playing a role. You were speaking and singing to an audience, which is very much what you just told us you do, which is you do these keynote speeches and motivational, inspirational speeches, but you also tie in singing with that, which is amazing. Maybe I'll even end this with like a little, maybe, I don't know, 2 phrases of a song. And what you're sharing with people in your keynotes is the same message that I'm trying to accomplish with what I share through SIOPA, which is you do want to inspire and empower people to go out after their dreams and to realize their dreams and to become their best selves. But at the same time, you're doing it through sharing this message that again, it's one and the same, that realizing your dreams and becoming your best self is also about knowing that you're enough as you are with nothing to prove to anyone else.
Exactly.
I love that so much. So you say, at this point in my life, I try to avoid buying into shoulds. We are each tasked with creating our lives from the inside out and living in accordance with our most deeply held values. And I think that's true, like everything else. And then I will end with one last quote before maybe you sing for us just a little bit. Where is that? It's where you talk about that the ends became the means. I have to find it. Hold on, that was like one of my favorites. Do you know what I'm talking about? The passage where
I don't actually.
Now I have to find it.
The others are all familiar as you start. I can almost say them with you, but
I thought it was
maybe I'll know.
It might be at the introduction. Yes, here we go. It's in the beginning. I thought it was at the end. It's in the beginning.
Okay.
It's in before chapter 1, the forward or the introduction. Okay, so listening to my inner voice, practicing self-compassion, and learning how to stand in my field of power is what got me a starring role on Broadway. The greater gift, though, has been that these same principles and practices have helped me to inhabit my truth and become more of my authentic self. The means, it turns out, were also ends in and of themselves. Love that. I know, I just got chills. All those years I was trying to get there, only to discover that landing here was actually what I was seeking all along.
Yeah.
You couldn't have gotten here if you didn't go there, right?
Right. It's one and the same.
Yeah.
We're all blossoming as we grow, and pursuing our passions is part of that, part of how we become more of who we are. It really is that hero's journey is about coming home to ourselves again and again and again with everything we do and all the things that we pursue. Mark Nepo, the author and poet, it has such a beautiful way of speaking to this about there is nowhere to go and nothing to do. Accepting this, we can be everything and go everywhere. It really is, you know, I mentioned field of power in that quote that you just read, and that comes from a Tibetan word that's, I think, pronounced Wang Tong, and it literally translates to authentic presence and field of power, that they are one and the same, that when we are in that place of knowing who we are, when we're really here and we're ourselves fully, that is where our real power comes from, without the need to prove, without the need to perfect, without the need to hide, no mask, just being our real self. That's where our authentic power comes from.
I would even, as you were, because I obviously read that, I remember reading that in the book, but as you were saying it now out loud again, it dawned on me that I would actually define that as what true passion is, what it means to live out of your passion, and what seizing your passion actually really means. It's the same thing.
That's beautiful.
I love that.
Chills.
Oh.
Yeah, that your passion is your aliveness. It's you. It's you giving yourself permission to be most unmasked and alive, whatever that looks like.
And it's powerful. It's that field of power.
Yes.
100%. I love that. Okay, so the book is Unmasking What Matters, 10 Life Lessons from 10 Years on Broadway. Sandra Joseph.
It's on Amazon. It's at sandrajoseph.com. And there are some free bonus gifts available. One of my favorite things is there's a meditation that is created by a company called Learning Strategies that I have used personally for years. Okay. It's a paraliminal, which most people are familiar with subliminal, where you don't hear the word. It's not that, but paraliminal, para meaning both. It communicates to both sides of your brain. So you'll hear two different voices speaking in each ear simultaneously.
Really?
And they very graciously have given my favorite paraliminal, which is called Peak Performance. They've given it away for free. It's a $30 meditation audio learning program that you can download for free in the bonus gift. So you go to sandrajoseph.com/unmasking.
And the bonuses are in the book itself?
You have to get the recording online. So yeah. And if you buy the book, you'll see a special link to go to as well. Okay.
So I'll when I post this, and I'm not even sure what this is going to look like, if I'm going to edit it or just leave it raw, but wherever and whenever I post this, I will make sure that I get that link from you so people can find it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So will you sing? You don't have to do a whole song, but maybe just.
No, I'm not going to sing. It's early. It's very early in the morning here. It would not sound right. So
I figured I'd try, but I remember back, when I was an actress, people would be like, okay, can you act? Can you do something? What
To
am I, a
be or
clown?
not to be? That is the question. It just doesn't,
Exactly.
out of context, it's not
Yeah.
very impressive.
All right. I figured I'd ask though. It didn't hurt. It couldn't hurt. All right. I'm going to say goodbye for our recording, but you and I will chat for 2 more minutes after.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me.
I
Thanks,
truly
everybody.
love you, Sandra.
I
Really.
love you too. You're my soul sister all the way. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I wish you all the best.
Me too. Here we go. Pause that. Bye, everyone.